Hey, Mason. Shannon, I'm going to let you tell us when you want us to get started. I think we're just missing one or two folks at this point.
Let's give it one more minute.
Sounds good.
I did see Adam coming in and out.
Adam just said technological difficulties. I'll be there as soon as I can.
Technology is so wonderful. You can use it to convey our technological difficulties.
Okay. All right, Randy, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you now.
All right. Well, let me first apologize for the informal nature of my setting. I had a pipe break in my well at my cabin this week, and so I'm down here in just south of Ohio Pile, needing to meet the well contractor in about an hour. But one of the upsides of Zoom, I guess, right? So let me start by just thanking everybody, for being here for our first MQE career chat. As we developed the program, this was a large part of what we wanted to embed in the process. We're essentially providing an opportunity for industry leaders to share with all of us their professional journey, their expertise, and just convey to our MQE graduate students, right, things that they have learned through their career. This is just a great opportunity for students to learn, particularly about specific industries, innovation, advances in networking, the workplace, readiness skills. And I'm just thrilled that we've got Dr. Peele here, right, for our first one of these. And I really want to thank you, Dr. Peele, for giving us your time. I know how valuable it is. And so in just a second, I'm going to turn things over to Tricia to introduce you. Also, just a brief update on where the MQE program is at this point. We're in the midst of our first quarter, which started on August 19th, and that first quarter will end October 6th. And we have 13 students, 10 of whom are in residence, meeting in person every morning, Friday, and 3 more who are joining us remotely. And let me apologize for that. Right now they're taking 3 courses. They're taking Individual Firms and Markets, which is taught by Professor Kevin Shaver, taking Quantitative Methods, which is taught by Professor Luca Rigatti, and then Communicating Economic Insights, which is a semester-long course, is being taught by Professor Marilee Nixon, who's also a professor at the Pitt Law School. And so let me just quickly introduce our student host, Patricia McMahon. Tricia studied finance and economics at Penn State University, something that we don't hold against her. She started her career at the Hershey Company as a co-op in their co-op intern during her senior year. She graduated, then moved to New York, where she joined the business analyst program at Ernst & Young in their financial services sector. And while at Ernst & Young, she worked on projects for both domestic and international banks. And then Tricia boomeranged back to Pittsburgh, which is where she's from, and started working with Giant Eagle. And was in the pricing department at Giant Eagle, where she was working on projects and responsibilities that included promotional effectiveness analysis, pricing and promotional strategy development, and then implementation along these dimensions as well. So my internet connection is a little bit rough because of where I'm sitting. So I'm going to turn my video off here in just a second when I turn things over to Trish, who's going to take it away and introduce Dr. Peele. It's all yours, Trish.
Thank you, Professor Walsh. Would like to reiterate, thank you, Dr. Peele, for joining us today. We're very excited to have you. I am the guinea pig for doing these career chats, so please be kind. So for everybody in the class, Dr. Peele is the Chief Analytics Officer for UPMC Health Plan and UPMC Enterprises, which is the venture capital arm of UPMC. She is responsible for creating innovative analytics that drive financial and clinical performance, including economic modeling, predictive modeling, statistical analysis, and machine learning. Prior to joining UPMC in 2006, Dr. Peele was the vice chair for the Department of Health and Policy at Pitt, Graduate School of Public Health. She currently holds faculty appointments at the Graduate School of Public Health and the School of Medicine. She was the first person chosen by IBM as an IBM Big Data Hero and was voted in the 2014 IT News Men and Women of the Year as a top innovator in healthcare analytics. Dr. Peele has over a decade of both patient care and academic research, positioning her as a leader of healthcare analytics. She received her bachelor's in economics from Roanoke College and her master's and Ph.D. in economics from Virginia Tech. So welcome, Dr. Peele. We are very excited to have you with us here today.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that nice introduction. So we will be joint guinea pigs here.
Okay. Always happy to share that burden with somebody. So we have kind of structured this in a little bit, and we're trying to work out the Zoom interactionness. So kind of have a structure. I have some questions to ask you, and then I'll be calling on some of my classmates to ask you their own questions as we go through it.
Okay.
So we would first like to ask you, kind of take you back to when you first decided to study economics. I read that it was because that's what you would graduate faster with. Is that really what drove the decision for you to study economics?
That is true, Tricia. So when I was so I am a registered EEG tech, you know, brain waves, nerve conductions, evoked potentials. And I worked at the Salem VA Hospital in Salem, Virginia, which is tangent to Roanoke. And I worked there for 13 years. I ran the neurodiagnostic lab. I spent a year in training at Shands Hospital in Gainesville, becoming an EEG tech. I was registered. I was one of the first registered EEG techs in the country, but I had a high school diploma. Oh, oops. So when I wanted to move out of direct patient care, because it's a little depressing, I couldn't get another job at the VA because all the jobs that I was interested in required a bachelor's degree. They didn't care what it was in, basket weaving, but you needed a bachelor's degree. So I went to school at night at the local community college. And I worked during the day at the VA, and I had a couple of side gigs. I was a sports photographer for the local newspaper on the weekend, and I did nerve conduction studies on the side for a nephrology group. So I went to, and the fastest way to get out of community college, Tricia, was general studies. So I have an associate's degree in general studies. Once I did that, I needed a bachelor's degree. There were two colleges very close to Roanoke. One is Hollins. So Hollins College is very well known for its writing and fine arts. And they have a nice course program as well. And Roanoke College, which both of them are private colleges, which is a small liberal arts college, and it's actually in Salem. They both accepted me. They both gave me exactly the same financial offer. So the cost to go to school was exactly the same between the two. It almost looked like collusion. They both gave me the same financial answer. Let's see, Hollins, where I would have majored in writing, I already had published poetry at that point. And Roanoke. Roanoke was 3 miles from my house, and Hollins was over 10. I chose Roanoke because it was 3 miles from my house. And at Roanoke, the path of least resistance, like how fast can I get out of here, was either business administration or economics. What I really liked was math and biology and whatever, but that was not the path of least resistance, Tricia. So I chose economics, and I got a degree from Roanoke College, my bachelor's degree in Roanoke College in economics. I was sitting in class one day, and my economics professor, my microeconomics professor, who I really liked, smart guy, I'm sitting there looking at him going, that's what I want to do. Like the costume, the little corduroy patches on the jacket, the whole thing, it was perfect, right? So I thought, I want to be an economics professor. To which they said, no. You would need a PhD to do that. And so I applied to 5 schools, Tricia, and I got, that's right, 5 rejects. And Virginia Tech was the school that was closest to me that I had applied to. And I just basically hounded them into taking me. And they had a little scheme at the time. They would admit up to 18. They didn't have a master's program. The master's, it was just the consolation prize. They would take up to 18 students. And at the end of the first year, everybody did exactly the same thing. The same courses, the blah, blah, blah. At the end of the first year instructors would sit down and choose up to 9 who could stay. So half the class was not going to make it past the first year. If you weren't selected, you could stay another semester and get a master's if you wished. So obviously I made it, and that's how I got a PhD in economics.
Well, you know, I'm a big fan of efficiency, so I understand those decisions that you made. It makes sense. So over the course of your career, you've seen the explosion of data availability, which we all know has become big data. How has big data impacted the understandings and capabilities of economics over your career?
So that's a very good question. I'm glad you asked that. People ask, you know, I get interviewed a lot, but it's unusual that somebody will ask such a thoughtful question. So congratulations on that. So the explosion of big data is biased. So here is what's happening to us from an economics and a health economics and a patient piece. You're right, we've had an explosion of data in lots and lots of different places. Like all those Fitbits, all those rich white people are wearing is creating digital data, right? It's creating digital data on rich white people. And then there is data that's being collected around people who are using telehealth visits. That's a biased sample of who chooses to use a telehealth. So the more data that we collect, it all has its own, most of it has its own inherent bias sitting in it. What we learn when we use the data, which is a big part of what we're using data for, is to learn. What should we be doing? We're learning on what is going on now. We're not actually learning what we should be doing, and we're not learning what is going to happen to the entire economy and population, because the data that's being collected is not uniformly collected and it's not standardized. And so that just keeps piling a bias on top of all this data that we have. Then we get greedy, because, you know, we're all data hogs. We get greedy and we decide that, oh, I've got all this data, I'm going to go run some machine learning on it. I'm going to look at the correlations between the sale of lipsticks and recessions. There is actually a correlation between the sale of lipsticks and recessions, which I'm betting is going to fall apart in this particular economy, because, like, really? What exactly does lipstick do here? So, but at any rate, now, you know, we get excited because we've got so much data, and we've got 3 things going on that are unbelievable. It's a perfect storm. We have buckets and
nexus. They keep it to themselves. That's the same figure 8.
So we have a lot of data. We have buckets and buckets of data. We have powerful algorithms. So artificial intelligence is not new. It's been around since the 50s. It just didn't have enough computational power. So we have tons of computational power and tons of storage. So we have great computational power, we have fabulous algorithms, and we have buckets of data. And that poured together makes people want to go out and do big data projects. The downside to this is flinging data around does not solve your selection bias problem. So I'm not sure that we learn well. We learn about what we were doing yesterday over the people with whom we get data, and I'm not sure we learn well. And the government, there's a role for government here. There's a role for standardizing data. But the government has not stepped into that in any large way.
I've never thought about it that way, and that all makes perfect sense. My mom is a doctor for UPMC in the HIV/AIDS thing, and she talks all of the time about the inconsistencies in who can do telehealth and who can connect with her in that way. And especially for HIV/AIDS patients, it's a much different type of population, and she really struggles with that. And I never really connected that to what your department would be learning from that information. I hear it from her, and that really, really hits home even within my family.
So for your mother, her concerns are extraordinarily well-founded. And in this COVID-19 explosion, telemedicine has exploded behind it. So there's been just this huge growth in the use of telemedicine. Broadband, which is the basis by which we do most of our telemedicine, is not a public utility. It is a private commodity. And the last mile in particular of broadband is a private utility, which is why broadband access is non-uniform in the United States, and in particular in what we call our frontier states. So Arizona, Utah, Nevada, Montana, Wyoming, they have the availability of broadband is not anywhere near as strong as, here in Pittsburgh, of course. So to the extent that telemedicine crowds out brick and mortar. Think about that. In the pre-COVID world, people went to the doctor. It was a brick and mortar. You had to find a parking place. Geez, you try to park in Oakland, try to find a parking place and you go sit in a nasty waiting room. That was the model by which care was overwhelmingly delivered in the outpatient setting, was the patient came to a brick and mortar place. With telemedicine, the patient doesn't have to come to a brick and mortar place. So what happens to the brick and mortar places? In an economic model, they get crowded out and they would be used for something else. Now what happens to the access and equity of access across the United States and from an economic perspective for people who are geographically divorced from broadband? We just crowded out your brick and mortar and you're geographically divorced from broadband. So we will be generating an unequitable access to healthcare that we never intended to generate. We thought that telemedicine was going to open up access to people. Just take out your phone and have a visit with your doctor. Because broadband is not uniformly distributed. So now the question is, what is the remedy? That's right, broadband. So uniform distribution of broadband would be the remedy. Who's going to pay for that? States that have really strong broadband in them have really strong broadband. States that don't. So should Utah pay to install the last mile broadband in their frontier areas? Should the feds come in and pay for that? The reason that it doesn't exist there is because there's no market. It's such a sparse, frontier land is an actual technical term from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And it refers to, I'm sorry, I don't know this off the top of my head, a population per mile less than something. So sparsely populated is what it means. There's no market because there's nobody to buy. This is why these private companies, and there are hundreds of them. You would not, it's not Verizon. There are hundreds of these companies. They're going to invest in the infrastructure to put it in because there is something to sell. And when there are 10 people to sell it to, you can't make enough money to justify the investment. So that really begs, that reality begs a policy remedy. And I would say the policy remedy should come from the feds, but that's always up for debate.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me of how a lot of like FedEx and UPS still have to rely on the postal service for the last mile in those same exact situations because they're the only ones who will service them by federal mandate. So kind of want to pivot to tying in some of your experience to what we are going to learn or are learning in this program. I've personally witnessed the battle between the use of data analytics to drive business decisions and the gut feel of how business has always been done. how do you deal with this and how much? And if any of this soft data, do you allow that to end up to be worked into the models and thus the decisions that come from the information you're gleaning from them?
So Tricia, you're hitting 100 here on the good questions. There is an ongoing, there are three ongoing structures, competing forces going on. One is, as a data scientist and an analyst, I'm going to show you the truth, at least as much as the data will reveal it. So I'm going to show you the truth of these data, which might not be the truth because there's bias in the data. But I'm going to show you the truth of these data, and we will make business decisions based on the truth of these data. I've been in this business for 40-something years, and this is how we have always done whatever it is we do. We have stayed in business successfully for 40-something years using the ruler and the pencil method, whatever it is we're using, right? So shut up and sit down. I know how to do this. We have the experience doing it. Right? Then there's the agenda. I have an agenda. I want to make sure that my pet program continues to operate. I want to expand, and the agenda need not be nefarious. I want us to stand up housing for homeless people. In fact, we do that. We do that at the health plan. We stand up housing for our homeless members. It's really an interesting program. So the agenda, but it's an agenda. Whether it's an evil agenda or a good agenda is neither here nor there. It is an agenda. And that is the pressure to have data support the agenda. So there's I don't want data. I only want data. I only want data that supports what I've already decided to do. So those are the competing pieces. My place of going with this is a preponderance of evidence. So when I've got somebody who really has don't you worry your pretty little head about it there, Missy. I've been doing this for years. I know how to do it. You take a ruler and a pencil and you do this and blah, blah, blah. Okay? Do your little thing, my sweet. I'm going to go over here and do actual real science. And most of the time, it's very interesting because there is something. People who can stay in business for decades doing whatever their little art of the business is, they're out scoring just chance. There's actually something there. And most of the time we agree. We might not agree to the magnitude, but we directionally agree. And if I can get directional agreement from solid science, I almost always win over the seat of the pants guy. Because to him or her, it validates the art of this thinking. It doesn't really, because their error term is usually pretty big, but that's okay. It's the agenda people that are the issue. I have an agenda. I want the data to service this agenda. I want you to give me data to show something or other. That is the hard place for me. That is the most challenging thing for me.
I would agree with that. When I started at Giant Eagle, there was an analytics manager who would just walk into meetings. He was so over it. He would just say, "What do you want the numbers to say? I'll make them say it." And I just knew from the beginning that was not the approach to take. But I think he was so worn out on fighting the fight that he just that was a sign that he had given up. So.
Indeed, that was a sign he should go find another job.
He did. It didn't take too long. Gayatri, would you like to ask the questions that you have for Dr. Peele now around the gathering of the data and the looking ahead?
Yeah, so I think a lot of my first question was actually answered like right now. And I guess my major question is, in the future, how integrated do you think technologies such as machine learning or cloud computing will be in the industry overall?
So there's that excellent question. Thank you. There's a big push to go A, to the cloud, and B, to run AI over the top of it. I don't think the future of it is as bright as some of my colleagues do. And there's a reason, of course, which is, again, all those data are biased. And so you can run the fanciest AI in the world. I have some scientists working for me who are just like knock your socks off smart. And we run unsupervised machine learning, and we run natural language processing. We run all kinds of things here. But what we produce is only as good as the clarity and sanctuary of the data. And when the data are contaminated, biased, whatever you want to call it, you're not going to learn. You're only going to learn off of that contamination. And so I think what will happen is data is exploding. Your point's well taken. And everybody and their brother, oh my God, let me tell you, there's like 1,001 vendors in this space. Everybody and their brother wants to play in this space. Everybody's got an AI platform, an AI something. They're going to sell you whatever it is they're going to sell you. Nobody is actually paying attention to the value of what comes out of that AI. And to the extent that we change our policies, the way we price pieces, the way we deliver care, the way we think about this, based on what's coming out of unsupervised learning over biased data sets, we will end up going to a bad place. And then people will lose their faith in all the AI. They'll lose their faith in the AI. They won't put their brain around. It's not the AI that's at fault. The algorithms are lovely. It's the underlying data that's a problem. And once they lose faith in AI, they will walk away. Oh, one other thing. So big, fancy, sophisticated data shops are not for the weak of wallet. So that's piece is, there was a large hospital chain in Texas. They hired the chief analytics officer from LinkedIn or Google, LinkedIn, and who didn't know anything about healthcare, but he knew, smart guy, knew a lot about, good mathematician, knew a lot about AI, it was good. And they allowed him to hire a team. I think he hired about a dozen, fancy schmancy, expensive data scientists. And they went, ooh, we know what to do. And a little over about 14 months later, they were all fired. Why were they fired? Well, they didn't know anything about the industry. They didn't understand the bias in the data. And what they were producing was actually wrong for making business decisions. So industry knowledge is important here.
Thank you.
So on that note of you talking about the quality of machine learning and AI, one of the things that I have experienced is the battle to get minute business processes change that have a very big effect downstream in terms of the data, models, AI, all of that. I'm assuming that you have encountered that, and what types of approaches have you done to explain why what might seem like a painful change to something that's been done the way it's been done for decades, and winning people over to actually change how they're doing to make what your teams do better?
Yeah, so that is a huge problem. And it comes back to, this is an operations problem. So this is operationalizing our care processes, our care coordination, whatever it is we're doing. It is very hard to get people to change the way they do something. I mean, seriously, particularly care, like nurses and physicians and care, people who deliver care, because they care deeply about the care that they're delivering, most of them. They've been delivering care for years. They think they know what they're doing. I'm not arguing that they do or don't, but they are making the best decision they can make in that point in time for this particular patient, one by one, who's sitting in front of them. And you're coming in, or I'm coming in, and saying, no, Nanette, you should do this first and then do that, is a bit of an insult. It's like having somebody come into my class at Pitt and tell me that the way I teach is wrong. Dude, I've been doing this for eons. Trust me on this one. So what I do is a simulation model. And we use a lot of simulation models. So I'm going to simulate to you what would happen if you ingested these data and changed your process. I'm going to show you, very few people do this. And the reason they don't do it is Did I mention that analytics were expensive? Yeah. The reason they don't do it is because it's really time consuming. To build a good simulation model is a very time consuming thing. So you have to be able to show them the money. You change this and here's where it flows downstream.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, it always comes down to money, but.
Yes, yes.
Spencer, would you like to ask your question about the flow of data and prioritizing?
Hi. So in the healthcare sector, there is a humongous amount of continuous data that's coming in. And my question is kind of, how do you determine what's useful and what's not? You kind of talked about how industry knowledge is very important to deciding what's works and what's not. But how do you kind of take the rest of the information that you're not sure that might be important and like use it in your problems if you need, like to figure out what's works and what does not?
Yeah, so this is a really important question. And it's really important to where you're going in your careers. Because you're right, Spencer, we're getting, in every nanosecond, data is flowing into the health plan. Claims are hitting our adjudication process constantly. Electronically submitted claims are coming in. Mountains of data, the scheduler data, the ADT fee, the admitted, discharged, and transferred fee from hospitals. This is an excellent example. We get what's called an ADT, admit, discharge, transfer, on our members when they are admitted, discharged, or transferred from a hospital. And we get it in real time. Ping, it's a ping that hits our system. It's incredibly useful and incredibly hard to use. And the reason is you could get 7 or 8 or 9 pings, they're literally like pings, on exactly the same discharge or admit. So here comes the request for the authorization. Didn't have a phone number in it. They ping us again. This one has a phone number, but it doesn't have the presenting symptom. So cobbling all of those together to make sure that you don't have any dupes, there's no duplicates going on, is incredibly, incredibly hard. We've automated most of the process, but it is really hard. Where is the decision point on whether that is important enough to bother with that data? And the decision point on us is that it's important enough to bother because an event such as an admit or a discharge or a transfer is a big deal. It's a big deal in a patient's life. It's a big deal financially. So it is both the quality and experience of the member and the money that flows underneath it. We let lots of data fall on the ground, just so you know. We get data constantly on pharmacy fills. Like how many nanoseconds between a pharmacy fill do I actually need to see in order to manage something? So a lot of those decisions get made by the clinical management. What they deem is, like, do I need to see, new pharmacy claims every minute? No. Do I need to see them once a day? Yes. But we get them constantly and we just let them fall on the ground. Labs is another good example. We take lab, not just, we know that you went to the lab, we got a bill for it, of course we know. But the actual lab value on the lab test, we get those on around 75% of all of our members. There are tons of lab tests, Spencer. I mean, in my little world, there's like a CBC and a cholesterol or something, I don't know. But in the real world, there's like, oh my God, it's overwhelming. Some of them are very rare and quite esoteric, and others are quite common. We let lots of that, how much of that lab data can we ingest? We ingest lab data, again, with clinical guidance from our providers, where there is enough completion of the data, or there is enough non-completion of the data. So labs that are very rarely used are powerful signals. Something is going, this is a really something test. It's only used in something, something, something. When you see it, run from the room with your hair on fire. Versus labs that are used all the time, CBCs, cholesterols, creatins, kidney functions, those labs that are used all the time. So, and again, part of it is exploration. We have a standard set of data that we use, and we will go and find new data and explore. We'll do a little exploration of what we think is useful. The scheduler data is a good example. We take the scheduler data out of Epic, which is an electronic medical record. We just take it once a day. Like, I can't be ingesting scheduler data all day long. But we know that Miss Sunshine, we know she was discharged 5 days ago because we have the ADT feed. We see that she had an appointment yesterday, a follow-up appointment, and we see that she failed to show. That data is important. And we use it and we send it to both our care manager and to her physician to remind them of what they're doing. So a lot of it is driven by clinical as well.
Thanks, Spencer. So I'm personally very excited to, I think, next quarter, we're gonna dive more into macroeconomics, coming from a company where we really just looked internally, wondering, you know, do you incorporate national or global macroeconomic variables into the models and the work that your teams do? And if so, how do you determine the importance of that versus internal data? And where do you get it? And how often do you update it and things like that?
So we do use national data and we use it as a benchmarking. What I have learned over time is you have to be mighty careful of what you're doing because economies are local. And whether we're talking about the delivery, the way that people practice medicine, what people choose to eat at grocery stores, those things are local. Like whatever, when I moved up here, I'm a native of the panhandle of Florida, and I've been here 26 or so years. When I moved up here, what? There's no Dixie Lily grits in the grocery store? What kind of a place is this? I had to have my father ship me 10-pound bags. It was crazy. So things are local. Food is local, healthcare is local, education is local. So national data sets give us a very fuzzy average, but there could be, you're not looking at the distribution, you're just looking at the average. So that we use a few, but we don't use them much because what we look at is local. Local benchmarking is very interesting. And we buy marketing data. It's publicly available. You know, when you signed up for that Get-Go card at Giant Eagle, you agreed to have your data sold, just FYI, and we bought it, just so you know. So we buy marketing data, which is extensive. There's a company called Axiom, which is the biggest aggregator of marketing data in the country. Holy schmoly, I know what magazines you subscribe to. I know whether you rent or own your house. I know how many kids are in the household. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of mind-boggling. I know your education level. And oh, by the way, people who subscribe to cooking magazines have a correlation with higher ED visits. Just a little tidbit for you. I didn't say it was causal. Careful there. I said it was a correlation.
You'll unsubscribe from Bon Appetit after this?
I didn't say it was causal. My advice is put down the wine until you're finished with the knife. There's my advice. So, you know, we use a lot of that kind of local data because we buy marketing data on a catchment area, but we also take census data. So we take census data down to the smallest track, the level 5 track, and we use census data to stand up areas that we think look like us. An area that has an academic medical center that's relatively rural around the, so Vanderbilt is a university is an area that we often look at. They've got a big academic medical center, but you get a mile or two out away from there and you're in the sticks. It looks very much like Pittsburgh. And then we use other kinds of data. Like we take the air quality data off of the air quality readers in Allegheny County. We actually take that daily. Right now, we're in the bad air season. And going up the Monongahela, the Mon, bad, hold your breath. Hold your breath when you drive through there. This is really bad air season. And there's a very tight, and the reason we do it is there's a very tight correlation between fluctuations in air quality and presentation to the emergency room by our members with asthma. Yeah. But the national, you know, we do use some financial benchmarking nationally. Like what is the cost trend nationally? And then some of those national benchmarks, particularly the ones that come out of Milliman, which probably produces the bulk of medical cost trends. Milliman gives us custom national benchmarks. So we want benchmarks around these SIC codes. We want these industries. We want these geographic areas. Milliman will create a quote unquote custom national catchment for us. And then we benchmark down off of that.
Okay. Very interesting. Sorry, I can't think of anything to respond with, but so I saw in an interview that you have hired a professional journalist to work in one of your departments to help communicate the results of your analytics teams and the resulting plans. How common is this? You know, what problems were you trying to overcome? And what level of communication skills are expected of people who just work on analytics in your departments?
So we have about 40 people in this little centralized shop. We don't do any routine reporting. They work on hard problems, they solve them, and then if it's going to be an ongoing process, it goes someplace else to be done on an ongoing basis. If the work that we do isn't consumed by the decision makers, we wasted our time and this company wasted its money. Simple as that. So we've got an expensive little sophisticated, it's not that little, sophisticated shop. If we're not as a company making decisions based on what they're doing, first of all, if the decisions that we make based on what they're doing are the same decisions we made in the absence of the data, congratulations, you don't need us. If we aren't making decisions, so if we make different decisions based on the fact that we now have intelligence and data, good, that's the value of the data. But that means that the decision makers, which is not a chief scientist, it's somebody running a line of business, has to be able to understand and ingest the meaning of the data. I call this analytic storytelling. There has to be a narrative that comes out of this. And if you think about it, you look across any large organization, bank in any industry, banking, gambling in particular, casinos, holy schmoly, they are the smartest users of data ever. They are amazing. But if you look across large companies, the people who are running the companies are people who get their news from, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the industry something magazine, the whatever it is. They're getting their news through that's been polished by a professional journalist. They are accustomed to the formatting and storytelling. The Wall Street Journal is particularly interesting. It has a very distinct narrative footprint. It starts out with a little, well, Trisha found out she lost her job and something, but it tells you there's a little story, right? And then it goes into the meat of the article. And then at the end of the article, it brings the little anecdote they started with to resolution. If you read the Wall Street Journal, that's very much their footprint. But what they do with the little anecdote is they hook the reader to read. Then they tell you about the meat and the policy and the national trends and blah, blah, blah. And then they bring you back to their little anecdote around the person and they tie it all up with a bow. That is what I need to have happen to my executive leaders. I need for them to read. So literally we try to do this. It's a little something, it's a teaser on the front. Like, how much money is being lost in blah, blah, blah county? Ding, 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 ding. Oh, and then we go through the whole analysis and then we come back and tie it up with a bow at the end. That is storytelling. So when I started doing this probably, I don't know, 8 or 10 years ago, we were by far the only people in the industry doing it. I was the only one employing a journalist. I went on my soapbox and went out and, this is what you guys have to do. This is what we have to do. This is what we have to do. And I noticed Health Management Academy, which is an interesting private organization out of Washington, of the 100 largest healthcare systems in the United States. I got a little webinar thing. I give talks for them sometimes. I got a little webinar thing from them. What is the name of the webinar? Analytic storytelling. So that is what I use a journalist for.
So with everybody consuming their news now through Twitter, does everything have to be condensed down to 140 characters now?
Yes. So, yes, you're nail on that, Tricia. What has happened to our attention span? It's like we can't get past 20 words. It's crazy. And so what has happened is I hate PowerPoint. I just really seriously hate that. But it has almost come down to our communication with each other is bullet points.
Yeah.
You know? And if we really want to shout, we bold one of the words.
Or put the period at the end instead of leaving it as an incomplete sentence.
Yes, yes.
So I think on that note of communication, Josh has a question about some of the graphics that you've used in the past.
Yes, so I saw in an interview in 2018, you talked about how you used geocoding to present data on chronic diseases in Western Pennsylvania. I was wondering, you said that you were the only people in the industry using this technology or these thought processes, and I was wondering how you came up with these techniques to visualize the data, and if there were any other techniques you'd be willing to share with us.
So thank you for that question. So in the industry at large, pretty much everybody geocodes, but they don't use the geocoding visually. So we use the geocoding visually. And I think part of that comes from the fact that, I think I mentioned that, I'm also a photographer. And so I'm a very visual person. I want to see, don't give me a table of number 2 font, letters or words or numbers. No, I don't need a ream of number 2 font tables. I do not need, thank you very much. I don't even know what to look at. But if you can visualize that to me in a way that I can see what is going on, I can act on it. So Josh, the idea that I came up with, and to my knowledge, we're still the only ones in the industry doing this. But when people see it, they get quite, I used to have it over here, it's not there now. They get quite excited of looking at it. So we geocode everybody, we geocode everything. We geocode the hospitals, we geocode the doctors, we geocode the homeless shelters, we geocode the grocery stores, we geocode everything we can get our hands on. And we geocode all of our members. Now I put each member on a map. So Josh, think of taking a map of Western Pennsylvania and put each member where they live. And I make each member as tall in a more sophisticated, if you wanted a sophisticated project, this would be a great one. I make them as tall as their stack of chronic diseases. So each person is a vector. Think of it that way. I think we use 31 chronic diseases. And it's just a 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, right? So you are as tall as your ones on your vector of chronic disease. You have 5 chronic diseases, you're 5 tall. You have no chronic diseases, you're ground level. So this is how I make each person. Now, when you do that, now I've got 3 dimensions, right? Because I've got a map down here, and I've got disease vector going this way. I've made a cube, and I put straight lines on it because I use a kernel density estimator. So once you put people where they live, they're all over the place. And some of them are very close and on top of each other, and they live in the same apartment building. And oh my gosh, they're all over the place. It's a bit of a mess. You use a kernel density estimator over the top of it to just smooth it. Just smooth it. Now you take a coronal slice through your cube, however far down you want to go, and you can see the mountains and valleys of chronic disease. Holy schmoly, Uniontown. Uniontown is a gigantic exploding mountain of chronic disease. It's amazing. And it's diabetes, 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 diabetes. Because I can look at each vector and see what's driving the mountains. So I can look in each area. If you go southwest of Meadville, which is north of here, cancer. Cancer, 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 cancer. They have twice the treatment prevalence of cancer of anybody else. They have a tiny, very narrow mountain of cancer. So that, when I see that, I don't need to look at a table with tiny numbers in it. I see the problem. And I think, again, that probably, Josh, comes from the fact that I also am a photographer.
Thanks, Josh. So we have about 10 minutes left. I'm gonna pick try to prioritize what we have left. I have two questions in particular related to UPMC enterprises I'd really love to try to get to. UPMC enterprises is, from my understanding, focused on sparking innovation, which Steve Jobs famously once said is the only way to win. Fear can be a large inhibitor of innovation. Do you experience the fear of failure with new ideas personally? And how do you get the enterprises team to let go of any fear of failure?
So good question. So enterprises is an interesting part of the organization. We have probably, I don't know, close to $1 billion in play in investing in both startups that we stand up. We ends with our clinicians. Somebody had a great idea, we stood something up, we invested in it. And then startups that we invest in. And those startups are usually very early in their career, which, Tricia, to your point, makes them also very ripe for failure. But they're cheap. So, and we don't invest in anything we won't use. So if we won't put it in our hospitals or in our health plan or in our whatever, we don't bother to invest in it. It's not solving a problem we have, we're not interested, because we're going to take that investment and put it in our own environment here and use it. And if it works, we've got a business proof of concept to go to market with. If it doesn't work, we're pulling the plug. So, and you're right, fear is always a problem there, but we have a culture of fail fast. Like, if you're gonna fail, please don't spend $200 million doing it. You know, spend a couple of $1 million, this ain't going anywhere, out the door with you. So we have an appetite to hang in there for things, but we really do, you know, it is okay to fail. It is expected. If we're not failing, we're missing opportunities, because the bulk of what you invest in does not work. It just, you can't get it in practice. It just does not. So most of these startups fail. And so that is sort of our meter. If you're not failing, we're missing opportunity.
Okay. You mentioned the culture there, which leads into my next question. Since switching to mostly working from home this year, there has been a wide array of opinions on the effectiveness of working from home and the impacts it has on collaboration, brainstorming, and sparking new ideas. Have your teams mostly switched to working from home? And if so, how have you continued to foster your culture in the remote environment and kept the spark alive for brainstorming and collaboration? What are the challenges and advantages for your teams?
So you can see I'm in my office. I'm at US Steel right now. So I'm in my office at US Steel, and I'm on the corporate suite, and pretty much all of my colleagues on the corporate suite are in their offices too. That is not true for the rest of this building. Talking to building management, he says on average there's about 150 people a day in all of US Steel, the tallest building in Pittsburgh. This place is a desert. So what I have noticed is, to your point, we've monitored working from home. We've monitored the productivity, everything from the call center to claims adjudication, denials, and approvals, and productivity is as high, if not higher, since we have been working from home, and that is true for the analytics group as well. The challenge, to your point, is the ideology, ideating. How do we all get in a room with a whiteboard and do it? So that is more of a challenge on the enterprises side than it is here, but it's a challenge on both sides. Everybody has Teams, so we use Teams. So everybody has Teams, everybody has video capability on their computers. And so we just get on a Teams meeting and go. The problem, and we've had really good productivity and innovation doing that, but it's slow. It's slow, Tricia. People have to raise their hand, or they have to, like, if you're in a room with 4 other people and you guys are cranking it like crazy, you're all just right on top of it. You're jumping in, you're right, oh no, we put this over here. That is a slower interruption or a slower input when you're working on Teams. So we have as much of, I think the creativity has not been impacted and the innovation hasn't been impacted, but the speed of doing it has.
Okay. I'm an extrovert, so I've hated every day of this, but I'm glad to hear that at least the creativity is still alive. Max, would you like to end us with your question, asking Dr. Peele for her advice for us? Which I kind of just gave a question, but.
Yeah, hello, Dr. Peele. My question was, what advice would you give to graduate students who are just trying to find their way in the world after school ends?
So I love your artwork. That's great.
Thank you very much.
So I'm pretty straightforward on this. People ask this all the time, and here's my advice to you. Live below your means. Always, ever, ever, ever in your career, in your life, live below your means. Follow the twinkle in your eye. So when it comes to asking, do I want to go and do this? Does it put a twinkle in your eye? Not do I think it's a good career move. So if I took this job that looks like it's going to kill me, it'll look great on my resume. And after 2 years, I can go and do something else. No, you will kill yourself. Do not squash the twinkle in your eye. It's the most precious thing that you have to guide you in your career. Live below your means will allow you to follow the twinkle in your eye. So this concept that every job I take has to be a step up, however you want to think about that. More money, more title, more, I don't know, more stuff, right? That's not true. That's not true. That's how people end up living miserable lives, because they try to title up, money up, and there they are. They're in that titled money thing for 20 years. They hate it. They hate it, they hate it, they hate it. But they've got the vacation house and the wife and the kids and the ex-wife and the ex-kids and the car and the something, and they can't afford to walk away from it. They can't see a path. Don't go down that path. Follow the twinkle in your eyes, live below your means. And then one other little piece of advice. When you are at an organization, whatever it is, you'll be working for somebody. That's the way it goes. I do 2 things when I come in every day to this job. And I will tell you, I think they are critically important to my success here because they keep me focused. Be the perfect servant. Figure out what this organization needs before they know they need it. Be the perfect servant. Get it ready. I got the event database ready, probably a year in advance of this organization being able to consume it. We consume it now constantly. Put your head up and look around, be the perfect servant. Know what the organization is going to need before the organization asks you for it, and make it ready. And solve more problems than you cause.
Thank you very much.
So we have just about 3 minutes left. So does anybody have any quick questions for Dr. Peele they want to ask before we wrap this up? If not, I have one last softball question that should take a minute. Anybody? Okay.
No.
Oh, go ahead, Max.
This question refers back to the geo map of southwestern Pennsylvania. When you were referring to the area southwest of Meadville, were you able to uncover what was causing those elevated risks of cancer?
So I did not, as an analyst and an economist, I did not go and dig around to see what type of cancer it was or what was causing it. But I do have a hypothesis untested. Let me be clear, Max, untested.
Okay.
Meadville, not so much now, but in decades past, 40 years or so, Meadville, Allegheny College is there in Meadville. They have a lot of dye and tool shops. And in fact, that was the sustaining industry in Meadville for decades, was dye and tool shops in the 60s, 70s, 80s, before the steel collapsed here. And they all use heavy metals.
Okay.
So heavy metals are the backbone of what goes on in a dye and tool shop. So if I had to go test the hypothesis, I'd tell you that heavy metals is where I would go. But I don't actually know, but it is striking. They have a 6% cancer treatment prevalence versus 3% everywhere else. Just eat lunch and move on if you're going through there.
Don't spend too much time. Well, we are right up at 2 o'clock. So I would just like to reiterate again, thank you so much, Dr. Peele. This was wonderful and it flew by. I was a little nervous about having enough material prepared, but you really sparked some great ideas, at least for me personally, I'm sure with my classmates as well. So we so appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today.
Thank you. And thank you for coming so prepared, all of you, for doing some background and coming prepared. That means a lot to me. I really appreciate that. And thank you for being code guinea pig with me, Tricia, on this. It was delightful.
Anytime. Thank you.
Have a great weekend, guys.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank you.